Audemus Dicere.
Lesson 2. The Popes and Latin. In Lesson 1 we established that Latin is universal, so what do the Supreme Pontiffs of the Universal Church actually say about it? Well, we don't have to look back too far in history to find an endorsement for Latin. After all, our current Pope and his predecessor, the Pope Emeritus, both speak Latin. His Holiness Pope Francis said that it's good for young people to study Latin, so that they may treasure the very rich heritage of the Latin tradition, which can help them navigate the path of life. Pope Francis's Latin Twitter page has nearly 1 million followers. Much like the language itself, Pope Benedict was immutable in emphasizing the importance of Latin. He founded the Pontifical Academy for Latin, and, in an apostolic letter, stressed that the Latin language was always held in very high esteem by the Church and popes. He notes that the popes assiduously encouraged the knowledge and dissemination of Latin, adopting it as the Church's language, capable of passing on the gospel message throughout the world. Benedict XVI considers the Church a custodian and champion of Latin, and expresses the necessity of Latin nowadays more than ever for studying many disciplines, including liturgy and canon law. After all, the liturgical books of the Roman Rite and most important papal documents are in Latin in their authentic form. The Holy Father stressed the use of Latin in the liturgy. When it comes to the large-scale liturgies gathering people from around the world, Pope Benedict endorsed the use of Latin as proposed by the Synod of Bishops to express the unity and universality of the Church. The Holy Father asked that future priests receive the preparation needed to understand and celebrate the Mass in Latin, to use Latin texts and Gregorian chant, and to teach the faithful to chant and pray in Latin in our home parishes around the world. In a message to the Salesian University in Rome, Pope John Paul II underlining the state of Latin as the official language of the Church, and hoped that the love of the language would grow ever strong among candidates for the priesthood. The saint also emphasized that the Roman Church has special obligations to Latin, the splendid language of ancient Rome, and she must manifest them whenever the occasion presents itself. The pontiff indicated that this one language, which in all the world was an expression of the unity of the Church, through its dignified character, elicited a profound sense of the Eucharistic mystery. The pontiff indicated that his predecessors, time and time again, emphasized the importance of Latin even in this age. He said that Latin is a universal language cutting across national borders, and the Apostolic See constantly makes use of it in its letters and acts addressed to the whole Catholic family. Paul VI entrusted the Pontifical Institute of Advanced Latin Studies to the Salesian University of Rome, declaring that the popes have always stressed the importance of the study of Latin and ancient languages for seminarians. In another apostolic letter, Paul VI stated that the cultural formation of the young priest must certainly include an adequate knowledge of languages, especially Latin. He founded the Latinitas Foundation. The Holy Father bound clerics to preserve the Latin language in the divine office, asking it to be eagerly guarded, defended with great care, held in high esteem, the glory of centuries. He called the language an abundant wellspring of Christian civilization, and a very rich treasure trove of devotion and piety. He assessed the Latin language and Gregorian chant to have wondrous spiritual power, transcending the boundaries of nations, a melody from the inmost sanctuary of the soul, where faith dwells and charity burns. A choir, removing itself from the language, would be like a snuffed candle, which gives light no more. No more attracts the eyes and minds of men. The Second Vatican Council was also vocal in support of Latin in the liturgy and the life of the Church. In its decree on priestly training, the Council underlined the need for seminarians to acquire knowledge of Latin, which will enable them to understand and make use of the sources of so many sciences and of the documents of the Church. The study of the liturgical language proper to each rite, Latin for the Roman Rite, was deemed necessary. When it comes to the sacred liturgy, the Constitution Sacrosanctum Concilium makes bold remarks. The use of the Latin language is to be preserved in the Latin rites. Steps should be taken so that the faithful may be able to say or sing in Latin the parts of the Mass which pertain to them. In accordance with the centuries-old tradition of the Latin Rite, the Latin language is to be retained by clerics in the divine office. The Church acknowledges Gregorian chant as especially suited to the Roman liturgy, and so it should be given pride of place in liturgical services. John XXIII founded the Institute of Advanced Latin Studies and declared that Latin is the rightful language of the Roman Catholic Church. The saint underlined Latin's pride of place in the Church, its dignified and majestic nature, preserved at great pains by the Holy See. The pontiff said that by God's special providence, this language united so many nations together. It gives rise to no jealousies. It does not favor any one nation, but it is equally acceptable to all. He found it fitting that the Church, founded by Christ the Lord, should use a non-vernacular language that can be called truly Catholic, consecrated by the constant use of the Apostolic See and a treasure of incomparable worth. Quoting Pope Pius XI, he remarked that Latin's concise, varied, and harmonious style, full of majesty and dignity, makes for singular clarity and impressiveness of expression. Pope Pius XII in Mediator Dei said that the use of Latin language affords at once an imposing sign of unity and an effective safeguard against the corruption of true doctrine. Pope Pius XI also spoke highly of the sacred language of Latin, stating that the Church, precisely because it embraces all nations and is destined to endure until the end of time, of its very nature requires a language which is universal, immutable, and non-vernacular. Pope Pius X indicated that the language of the Roman Church is Latin, and it is therefore forbidden to sing anything whatever in the vernacular in solemn liturgical functions, much more to sing in the vernacular the variable or common parts of the Mass and office. Now that we have provided a rationale for Latin in the Church and for our brief study of Latin together in this series, let us set out a learning plan. The goal of this series is not Latin proficiency, but Latin appreciation. We will begin very simply with covering the pronunciation of key prayers, and then move on to the prayers of the Mass of Ages. This will largely be a liturgical catechesis coupled with selected linguistic topics, just to get a feel for how the language works and to learn some vocabulary. In the future, we hope to briefly outline the mechanisms of the language, mainly grammar topics, and provide direction to more detailed learning materials.